The war had been going on for 300 years, and nobody remembered anymore why it started. The Vryn Collective and the Kethri Empire controlled opposite sides of the galaxy, and they hated each other with a burning passion that had consumed generations. The Vryn were strange beings made of living crystal that could talk to each other with their minds. They moved in perfect synchronization like a single organism spread across 1,000 ships. Their fleet sparkled in the darkness of space with geometric precision and cold beauty. Every Vryn knew their place and followed the ancient military doctrines without question. The Kethri were completely different. They were massive reptilian warriors who stood 3 meters tall, with scales like armor and claws that could tear through steel. Each Kethri lived for personal glory and individual combat. Their culture revolved around honor duels and proving strength in battle. Their warships were painted red with the blood marks of previous victories. For 3 centuries, these two empires had been locked in an endless cycle of violence. Dozens of star systems lay in ruins between their territories. Billions had died, and entire species had been wiped out as collateral damage. In battles they never asked to be part of, the other spacefaring civilizations in the galaxy had long ago chosen sides or declared neutrality. Nobody believed the war would ever end. Both sides were too evenly matched and too stubborn to surrender. The Vryn had plasma weapons that could melt through ship hulls in seconds. The Kethri had phase shift shields that could deflect almost any attack. For every Vryn tactical advantage, there was a Kethri counter strategy. For every Kethri breakthrough, there was a Vryn defensive doctrine. War had become predictable, like a dance where both partners knew every step. Fleet battles followed the same patterns they had followed for centuries. Ground invasions adhered to calculated protocols that both sides understood. Even the atrocities had become routine and expected. In the Talax 9 system, a major battle was scheduled to begin. Both sides had been preparing for weeks and moving ships into position. The Vryn Admiral, known as Crystalline Mind of 17, commanded 200 warships arranged in the traditional 7-layer defensive sphere. She was old by Vryn standards, having fought in 43 major engagements over her long career. Her crystalline body glowed with a soft blue light as she communicated telepathically with her fleet commanders. Every ship knew its role, and every Vryn warrior was prepared to die in perfect synchronization if the battle demanded it. On the other side of the system, the Kethri War Master Scourth roared orders to his fleet captains. He was a veteran of 62 battles, and his scales bore the scars of countless duels. His red eyes gleamed with anticipation as he studied the Vryn formations on his tactical display. Scourth had fought Crystalline Mind of 17 7 times before. Each battle had ended the same way, with both sides withdrawing once casualties reached 30%. Was an unspoken rule that had developed over centuries. Neither side wanted to risk everything in a single engagement, so they fought until losses became unacceptable, then retreated to fight another day. Scourth expected today would be no different. His fleet of 200 ships would clash with the Vryn, would exchange fire for approximately 6 hours. Somewhere between 50 and 70 ships on each side would be destroyed. Then both fleets would withdraw, and the strategists would analyze the battle to prepare for the next one in another few months. This was how the war worked, and how it had always worked. The neutral observers had already positioned their recording drones to capture footage of the battle for the Galactic news network. Spreading pools across a dozen worlds were taking wagers on which side would withdraw first. Weapons manufacturers were excited about the opportunity to test their latest innovations in real combat conditions. Everything was proceeding according to the established patterns of warfare. Then something unexpected happened. A small ship appeared at the edge of the system, traveling on primitive nuclear pulse engines. It was barely the size of a Vryn scout vessel, and its hull was made of simple titanium alloys. The ship's energy signature was pathetically weak, compared to the military vessels gathering for battle. Both the Vrin and Cathari sensors detected it immediately, but neither side paid much attention unidentified. Vessels occasionally wandered into war zones and were usually destroyed as a matter of course, or simply ignored if they seemed harmless. This vessel appeared to be on an exploration mission based on its sensor emissions. It carried no visible weapons except for some basic kinetic railguns that might as well have been throwing rocks. The ship's crew of 50 seemed to be running geological surveys and taking astronomical measurements. They were completely oblivious to the massive military buildup happening around them. Crystalline Mind of 17 noted the vessel's presence in her tactical log, but assigned it zero threat priorities. Kalef glanced at the sensor reading and dismissed it as irrelevant clutter. The battle was about to begin, and neither commander had time to worry about some lost exploration ship. The Vrin fleet began its approach in the traditional opening formation. The Cathari responded with their standard aggressive counter-positioning plasma cannons. Charged and shield generators hummed with building energy. In 15 minutes. The battle would commence and follow the same pattern it had followed for 300 years. The two small exploration ship's crew finally noticed the two massive fleets. They immediately tried to activate their jump drive to escape a stray shot from a Vrin. Particle beam test firing clipped their engine section. The exploration ship tumbled out of control into the debris field of a shattered moon. Its distress beacon activated automatically, crying out into the void for help that would not come. The battle began exactly on schedule. Neither fleet noticed or cared about the crippled ship hiding among the rocks. They had a war to fight and traditions to uphold, but everything was about to change. Humanity had just stumbled onto the galactic stage, and nothing would ever be the same again. The crew of the exploration vessel, known as the Owens Endeavor, watched in horror and fascination as the two alien fleets tore into each other. Captain Maria Santos had never imagined first contact with alien life would happen like this. Her ship was crippled and powerless, drifting in a debris field, while two civilizations demonstrated the full fury of interstellar warfare. It was terrifying and mesmerizing and completely insane, and somewhere in the back of her mind, a dangerous thought began to form. These aliens had no idea what they were doing. The Owens Endeavor drifted silently among the shattered remains of what used to be a moon. Captain Maria Santos gripped the armrests of her command chair as another shockwave rocked the damaged ship. Through the view screen she could see the battle raging across the system. Brilliant flashes of plasma fire illuminated the darkness, and ships exploded in silent fury. Her crew of 50 scientists and diplomats had left Earth 6 months ago on humanity's first deep space exploration mission. They were supposed to be searching for habitable worlds and making peaceful contact with any alien civilizations they might encounter. Instead, they had jumped into the middle of an interstellar war. "Captain, our jump drive is completely fried," reported Engineer Marcus Webb from his station. "We took a direct hit to the main reactor housing, and I can't even get auxiliary power to the drive coils." Santos nodded grimly. Without the jump drive, they were trapped here until someone noticed them, or until they died. "How long can we maintain life support on emergency power?" Webb ran some calculations on his damaged console. "Maybe 8 days if we shut down everything not essential." First Officer Jackson Chun was studying the tactical display with intense focus. He had served in Earth's military before joining the exploration corps, and his strategic training was screaming warnings at him. "Captain, are you seeing this?" he asked quietly. Santos moved to stand beside him. "What am I looking at?" Chun pointed at the display where the computer had been tracking ship movements and plotting predictive trajectories. "Watch the pattern," he said. "The crystalline ships always maintain this 7-layer formation, even when individual vessels are destroyed. The red ships always attack from these specific vectors and never deviate more than 15 degrees. Scientists watched as another wave of attacks played out exactly as Chun had predicted. "They're following a script," she said with dawning realization. "Not just a script," Chun replied. "They're following the same script they've probably been following for decades or centuries. Look at the casualty rates." He pulled up another screen showing ship losses for both sides. The crystalline fleet has lost exactly 31% of their vessels, and now they're withdrawing. The red ships lost 30%, and they're pulling back too. Santa stared at the numbers. "You're telling me they fought a 6-hour battle across an entire star system, and both sides are just leaving? Nobody won, nothing changed, and they're just going home?" Chum nodded slowly. "That's exactly what I'm saying. This isn't a war, Captain. It's a ritual." The crew watched in stunned silence as both massive fleets disengaged and began forming up for departure. Thousands of lives had been lost and dozens of ships destroyed, but the strategic situation appeared identical to what it had been before the battle started. "This is insane," muttered Chief Science Officer Dr. Sarah. "Kim, why would anyone fight like this?" "Because they've forgotten how to fight any other way," Chun answered. As the fleets prepared to jump away, something changed. Endeavor's distress beacon was finally detected by both sides. The humans watched their sensors as two small craft detached from the departing fleets and began moving toward their position, one crystalline vessel and one red ship. "Are they coming to help us or kill us?" asked Webb nervously. Santa straightened her uniform. "Only one way to find out. Everyone stay calm and remember the first contact protocols. We represent all of humanity right now." The two alien ships arrived at the debris field simultaneously and immediately took up positions on opposite sides of the Endeavor. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then, both ships launched boarding shuttles. Chun checked his tactical display and his jaw dropped. "Captain, the two alien shuttles just met outside our airlock and they're not fighting." "What are they doing?" Santos asked. "It looks like they're negotiating." For 20 minutes, the human crew watched in bewilderment as the two alien boarding parties communicated with each other using translation devices. Finally, Chun announced, "I think they're arguing about salvage rights." "They're what?" Santos couldn't believe it. "They appear to be following some kind of treaty provisions about claiming damaged vessels in contested space," Chun explained. "They're debating property law?" Dr. Kim laughed hysterically. "They're having a legal argument about who gets to claim us while we're still inside the ship." Santos made a decision. "Open the airlock," she ordered. "Captain, are you sure?" Webb protested. "We have no weapons, no shields, and no way to escape," Santos replied. "Our only option is to talk to them. So let's invite them in for negotiations." The airlock cycled open and both boarding parties entered cautiously. The humans got their first look at alien life. The Vrin representative was a being made of translucent crystal that glowed with internal light. It communicated through a translation device in musical tones. The Cathari warrior was a 3-meter-tall reptilian monster, covered in scarred red scales and carrying weapons that looked capable of tearing the ship apart. It spoke in deep growls that the translator rendered into harsh syllables. Both aliens stopped short when they saw the humans. Vrin's glow flickered with what might have been confusion. The Cathari's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Captain." Santos stepped forward with her hands visible and empty. "I am Captain Maria Santos of the United Nations. Earthship Endeavor," she said clearly. "We come in peace and we need assistance." The Vrin scanned her with some kind of device when it spoke. Its tone was dismissive. "This species possesses no telepathic capability, no energy manipulation abilities, and no enhanced physical characteristics. They appear to be barely sentient primitives who achieve space travel through crude technological means." The Cathari snorted with contempt. "They are weak," it growled. "Their bodies are soft, and their ship is fragile. They have no honor and no strength worthy of recognition." Santos kept her expression neutral, despite the insults. "Nevertheless, we are here and we request safe passage back to our homeworld? The two aliens looked at each other, then back at the humans. The Vren spoke first. This species was unknown to the collective. They represent a potential resource or liability in the ongoing conflict. The Ketheri agreed. Whoever claims them first gains advantage. They must choose allegiance. Santos felt a chill run down her spine. Choose allegiance to what? To the Vrin Collective or the Ketheri Empire, the crystalline being explained. You have entered a war zone, and all species must declare their position. You will be granted provisional status and given one standard cycle to decide. If you refuse to choose, both empires will claim your territory as disputed space. The Ketheri warrior bared its teeth in what might have been a smile. Choose wisely, primitive one. Your species' survival depends on it. Santos looked back at her crew. They were terrified, but trying to maintain composure. She turned back to the aliens. We need time to consult with our government. We need to communicate with Earth. Denied, both aliens said simultaneously. You have 6 days to decide based on information we provide. The Vrin stated, no external contact will be permitted. This is standard protocol for provisional species. Santos realized with growing horror that humanity had just been dragged into a 300-year-old war by accident, and they had less than a week to decide their fate. 6 days, she said quietly. We'll have our answer in 6 days. The aliens nodded and returned to their shuttles as the airlock sealed behind them. Santos turned to face her crew. They were looking at her with fear and hope and desperation. First Officer Chun, she said, I want you to gather everything we can about this war. Every scrap of data, every recording, every piece of information. Everyone else start analyzing what we just saw. Chun looked confused. Captain, what are you planning? Santos smiled grimly. I'm planning to do what humans do best. She replied, I'm going to cheat. The transport ship carried the Endeavour crew to a massive space station called Concordia 7 that floated in neutral territory between the two warring empires. The station was ancient and enormous, with sections built by a dozen different species. Over thousands of years, it served as the only place where Vrin and Ketheri representatives could meet without immediately trying to kill each other. Captain Santos and her crew were given cramped quarters in a section reserved for provisional species. The rooms were bare metal with sleeping platforms, and basic sanitation guards from both empires stood outside their doors to ensure they couldn't communicate with Earth for 2 days. Representatives from both empires took turns presenting their cases to humanity. The Vren offered protection and technology in exchange for total submission to collective authority. They showed recordings of their beautiful crystalline cities and spoke of the peace that came from unified thought. They promised humanity would be safe as long as they obeyed Vrin law and accepted Vrin guidance in all matters. The Ketheri made different promises. They offered vassalage and the honor of serving as auxiliary troops in their mighty legions. They showed videos of glorious battles and spoke of the pride that came from serving a warrior culture. They made it clear that humans would always be second-class citizens, but at least they would be on the winning side. Both presentations were essentially the same underneath the different rhetoric: submit or be destroyed, choose us or choose extinction, bow down or be conquered. Captain Santos listened to it all with a polite smile and thanked both sides for their generous offers. Then she requested 30 days to consider the options. The request was denied. She asked for equipment to contact Earth's government. Also denied. Humanity had 6 days to choose, and they had to decide based only on what the two empires told them. The aliens expected the terrified primitives to pick whichever option seemed less awful, and then humanity would become just another minor player in their eternal war. They did not understand humans at all, while the Vren and Ketheri assumed the crew was debating between the two Options. Santos had her people doing something completely different. First Officer Chen spent every waking hour studying the war itself. Dr. Kim analyzed 3 centuries of public battle reports. Engineer Webb examined the economic data about resource allocation. Every crew member was assigned a different aspect of the conflict to investigate. They interviewed neutral species merchants who traded in the buffer zones. They accessed historical archives that documented the war's evolution. They studied tactical recordings and casualty figures and treaty documents. They built models and ran simulations and looked for patterns. What they discovered was shocking. "Captain, you need to see this," Chum said on the 5th day. His eyes were red from lack of sleep but bright with excitement. Santos joined him at his workstation, where data scrolled across multiple screens. "Show me," she said. Chun pulled up a massive timeline. The war started 300 years ago over a disputed Mayan colony, he explained. Within 50 years, it had spread to encompass both empires. But look at what happens after year 100. He highlighted sections of the timeline. The casualty rates stabilize, Santos observed. "Exactly," Chun confirmed. "For the first century they were really trying to destroy each other. Fleet tactics were innovative and aggressive. Entire star systems were rendered uninhabitable. Then something changed." He showed her battle analysis data. Around year 120, both sides independently developed the 30% withdrawal doctrine. It wasn't agreed upon in any treaty. It just emerged naturally as both empires realized that total warfare was destroying them. Santos began to understand. They couldn't afford to keep fighting at full intensity. Right. Chun agreed. So they scaled back to a sustainable level of conflict. They turned the war into a managed system. Dar Kim joined them with her own findings. "It gets worse, Captain," she said. "Look at the economic data." She displayed charts showing industrial production and trade patterns. Both empires have economies that are now completely dependent on the war. Kim explained. The Vrin military-industrial complex employs 40% of their population. The Cathari warrior caste represents 60% of their social structure. If the war ended tomorrow, both civilizations would face economic and cultural collapse. Santos sat down heavily. "They don't want to win," she said quietly. "They can't win," Chung corrected. "The war has become the foundation of both societies. It defines their identities and drives their economies. They've been fighting for so long that they've forgotten they could do anything else." Webb added his analysis. "The neutral species have built entire trading empires around supplying both sides," he said. "They're making fortunes selling weapons and resources and repair services. Everyone profits from the war staying exactly as it is." Santos looked at her crew. "So what you're telling me is that this war could be ended tomorrow if anyone actually tried. But nobody tries because everyone benefits from the status quo?" "That's exactly what we're saying," Chun confirmed. "This is the most inefficient conflict in history. They're not fighting to win. They're fighting to keep fighting." Santos stood and began pacing her. Mind was racing through possibilities and consequences. What would it take to actually end this war? She asked. Jen brought up a tactical simulation. "Honestly, not much," he replied. "Both sides are so predictable and so locked into their patterns that a moderately competent strategist could exploit them easily. Their defenses are designed to counter each other, not to counter unconventional tactics. They haven't innovated in 2 centuries because they haven't needed to." Santos stopped pacing. A wild idea was forming in her mind. What if we offered to end the war? The crew stared at her. "Captain, that's insane," Webb protested. "They'll think we're mocking them." "Good," Santos replied with a fierce smile. "Let them think that. Let them underestimate us. That's our advantage." On the 6th day, Captain Santos stood before an assembly hall filled with representatives from both empires and a dozen neutral observer species, the Vrin and Cattery sat on opposite sides of the chamber, glowing and growling respectively. Neutral observers were placing bets on which empire the humans would choose. Santis walked to the central podium with confident steps. She had spent the night preparing her speech, and she knew it would either save humanity or doom them. "We have carefully considered both offers," she began. Crowd leaned forward expecting a capitulation. "And we have decided that humanity chooses neither the Vring Collective nor the Cattery Empire." The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Instead, Santis continued, raising her voice. "Humanity declares this war to be inefficient, wasteful, and strategically absurd." The murmurs turned to outraged shouts. The Cattery representatives roared insults. The Vrin glowed with what their translators described as profound offense. Santis waited for the noise to die down. "We offer to end this war within 90 days, if given access to both empires' military infrastructure." Now the chamber exploded into genuine chaos. Laughter, mixed with death threats. Several Cattery began issuing formal combat challenges. The Vrin representatives were literally flickering with the telepathic equivalent of shouting. The neutral observers were frantically updating their betting pools. Santis remained calm at the podium. She nodded to Chen, who activated a holographic display. "We have analyzed 3 centuries of your conflict," she said, "and we have identified 17,000 tactical inefficiencies, 12,000 strategic errors, and 600 major vulnerabilities that neither side has exploited." The laughter died down as the data appeared for everyone to see. "You have forgotten how to fight," Santis stated bluntly. "You have turned warfare into theater. You maintain this conflict because it serves your economic and social interests, not because you want to win. We can prove this." She paused dramatically. "Give humanity one chance to demonstrate our capabilities. One battle where we serve as tactical advisors. If we fail to prove our worth, we will accept vassal status under whichever empire shows us mercy. If we succeed, you will grant Earth full alliance status and admit that maybe you don't know everything about warfare." Chamber fell silent. The Cattery War Council conferred among themselves. To them, this was an opportunity to humiliate the arrogant primitives before crushing them completely. The entertainment value alone was worth granting the request. The Vrin Collective reached a consensus through their telepathic network. They could not refuse without appearing afraid of these weak creatures. Both sides agreed simultaneously. Santis had 90 days to either end a 300-year war or condemn humanity to slavery. The neutral observers began taking bets on humanity's survival. They gave the humans less than 5% odds. War Master Scourith watched the humans board his flagship with barely concealed contempt. The same pitiful creatures who had stumbled into his battle at Talax 9 were now presuming to advise him on military strategy. It was offensive and ridiculous, and he intended to enjoy watching them fail. "You will observe from the auxiliary command deck," he growled at First Officer Jackson Chen. "You may offer suggestions, which I will ignore. When your ideas prove worthless, you will admit humanity's inferiority." Chen nodded politely. "I understand, War Master," he replied. "Thank you for this opportunity." Scourith led the human through the corridors of his massive warship. Athari warriors stopped to stare at the small, soft alien walking among them. Some hissed insults, and others laughed. Chen ignored them all and focused on studying the ship's layout and crew organization. They were preparing to engage a Vrin fleet in the Hadros system, commanded by Admiral Crystalline Mind of Ninite. Would be a standard engagement, with traditional formations and predictable outcomes. Kaleth expected to lose between 28 and 32 ships. Before withdrawing with honor, he expected Chen to suggest something foolish and primitive that would be easily dismissed. What he did not expect was for Chen to spend the first hour simply watching the humans. Said nothing as the fleet assembled. He asked no questions as they jumped into the Hadros system. He just observed with intense focus, taking notes on a small data pad. Finally, As both fleets began their opening maneuvers, Scalrith grew impatient. "Well, human?" he demanded. "What brilliant strategy do you propose?" Chun looked up from his datapad. "I have a question, War Master," he said quietly. "What is your objective in this?" "Battle?" Scalrith blinked his massive eyes in confusion. "To destroy Vryn ships and prove Cathari superiority." "No," Chun replied. "That's your method, not your objective. What are you trying to accomplish beyond the battle itself?" Scalrith realized he didn't have an answer in 300 years of warfare. No one had asked him that question. "I fight to maintain our territory and weaken the enemy," he finally said. Chun nodded. "And what would weaken the enemy more than destroying a few dozen ships?" Scalrith thought about it. "Destroying their ability to replace those ships?" "Exactly," Chun confirmed. He pulled up a star chart on the tactical display. 3 light hours from here is a Vryn supply depot," he explained. "It provides fuel, ammunition, and spare parts to 3 entire sectors. Admiral Crystalline Mind of 9 is here to defend it. But she's defending it by fighting you in the traditional way. What if you didn't fight traditionally?" Scalrith leaned forward with growing interest. "Explain," Chun outlined his plan. "Take 1/3 of your fleet and engage the Vryn in the standard opening formation," he said. "Admiral 9 will respond according to her doctrine. She always prioritizes fleet cohesion and maintaining formation integrity. While she's focused on the initial engagement, jump the rest of your fleet directly to the supply depot. It will be undefended because she can't split her forces without violating Vryn military doctrine." Scalrith's eyes widened. That would mean abandoning the honor of direct combat. It would mean ignoring the traditional rules of engagement. "Yes," Chen agreed. "Is that a problem?" The War Master stood silent for a long moment. He was a creature of tradition and honor codes. The plan Chun suggested violated dozens of established protocols, but a darker part of his warrior mind recognized something important. Humans had no traditions to constrain them. They could do things that Cathari and Vryn had forgotten were possible. "If I do this, and it succeeds," Scalrith said slowly, "the Vryn will claim we fought dishonorably." "They will," Chun confirmed. "They'll also have lost a critical supply depot and 3 sectors of territory. Which matters more to you?" Scalrith made his decision. "Implement your plan, human," he ordered. "If it fails, I will kill you myself. If it succeeds, I will name you Blood Brother of the Cathari." "Fair enough," Chun replied. The battle began according to traditions. Kaos Vanguard Force engaged Admiral 9's fleet in the standard opening clash. Plasma, fire, and phase-shifted missiles filled the space between the 2 forces. The Vryn maintained their perfect 7-layer formation. The Cathari attacked from the 3 traditional vectors. Admiral 9 watched from her flagship with satisfaction. Everything was proceeding as expected. She would destroy approximately 30% of Scalrith's vanguard. Then both sides would withdraw. It was the way battles had been fought for generations. She did not notice that 2/3 of the Cathari fleet was missing. Her doctrine did not account for enemies who split their forces when the rest of Scalrith's fleet appeared at the supply depot 3 light hours away. 9 finally realized something was wrong, but by then it was too late. The depot's defenses were minimal because they had never been necessary. Within 20 minutes, the Cathari had captured the entire facility. They seized enough supplies to sustain their fleet for 6 months. They destroyed what they couldn't carry. Admiral 9 received the reports with shock that made her crystalline body flicker erratically. Her doctrine had clear instructions for the situation: maintain fleet cohesion, do not split forces to defend secondary objectives. Trust that the strategic balance would be maintained. But the strategic balance was not being maintained. For the first time in 70 years, a Cathari force had achieved a genuine strategic victory. 9 ordered the traditional withdrawal at 30% casualties, jumped her fleet away, still following her training. Meanwhile, Scalrith stood on his command deck staring at the tactical display in amazement. "We won," he said quietly. "We actually won something real." Chun smiled. "You won because you stopped fighting their war and started fighting your own war." The news of the victory spread through both empires like wildfire. The Kethari celebrated Skalrith as a tactical genius. He was honored with medals and songs, though he insisted on crediting the human advisor. The Vryn Collective convened emergency councils to analyze what had happened. They demanded to know how the Kethari had broken protocol. When they learned humans were involved, they made an immediate decision. If the Kethari had human advisors, then the Vryn needed them too. Within 3 days, both empires were competing to recruit human military consultants. Captain Santos found herself besieged by offers from both sides. They promised technology resources and status if humanity would send advisors. To help them, the neutral species watched in fascination as the primitives suddenly became the galaxy's most valuable commodities. Santos accepted both offers. She announced that human consultants would work with both empires. They would teach both sides what they had forgotten, how to fight to actually win. The galaxy reacted with shock and confusion. Working for both sides was unprecedented. Surely, the humans would betray one empire or the other, but Santos had a different plan in mind. Over the next 30 days, human advisors spread throughout both militaries. They taught the Vryn to break formation when tactically advantageous. They showed the Kethari how to coordinate instead of competing for individual glory. They introduced concepts that had been forgotten or never learned: strategic depth and operational flexibility, economic warfare and information dominance, psychological operations, and asymmetric tactics. Both empires began winning battles they would have previously abandoned. The Vryn captured a major Kethari shipyard using a feint and bypass maneuver. Kethari destroyed a Vryn command node with a deep infiltration strike. Territory that hadn't changed hands in centuries suddenly became contested. The war intensified to a level not seen in 200 years. Systems changed ownership. Civilian casualties mounted. The carefully managed ritual of war became raw and desperate. Both empires blamed the humans for breaking the equilibrium, even as they begged for more advisors. The neutral species condemned humanity for escalating a contained conflict. The betting pools started taking wagers on which empire would win the total war they were now fighting. Captain Santos watched it all from Concordia 7 and waited. She had unleashed chaos across the galaxy, but chaos was exactly what she needed, because 43 days into the 90-day agreement, both empires achieved something. Simultaneously, they both developed clear paths to total victory. The Vryn had positioned a massive fleet to strike the Kethari throne world, and coordinated assault would decapitate the Empire's leadership. The Kethari had assembled forces capable of shattering the Vryn collective central communication nodes. Without their telepathic network, the Vryn would collapse into isolated fragments. Both sides prepared their final devastating strikes. Both sides believed they would win the 300-year war. Neither side realized they were both right, and that was exactly what humanity had been planning all along. The galaxy held its breath as both empires prepared for their final strikes. After 300 years of ritualized combat, the war was about to end with real victory. Vryn had assembled 700 ships in a massive fleet that would overwhelm the Kethari throne world's defenses. The Kethari had positioned strike teams throughout Vryn space, ready to simultaneously destroy 12 critical communication nodes. Both sides were certain of their impending triumph. Both sides were completely unaware that they were walking into humanity's trap. War Master Skalrith stood on his flagship, reviewing the attack plan for the 100th time. His forces were positioned perfectly. In 6 hours they would strike, and the Vryn collective would shatter. The human advisor Jackson Chun had helped develop the strategy, and Skalrith trusted him completely. After 40 days of working together, The Cathari commander had come to respect human tactical thinking on the other side of the galaxy. Admiral, crystalline mind of 9, prepared her massive assault fleet. Her human advisors had shown her how to concentrate overwhelming force at a single, decisive point. The Cathari throne world would fall and the Empire would collapse. She was grateful for humanity's guidance. Both commanders received the same message simultaneously. Captain Maria Santos was requesting an emergency session at Concordia 7. All military operations were to pause pending urgent diplomatic developments. Kolth roared in fury. We are hours from victory. He protested to his staff. Why would we delay now? 9's crystalline form flickered with irritation. This is highly irregular, she communicated to her subordinates. We should ignore the request and proceed. But neither could refuse outright. The humans had proven their value repeatedly. If Santos claimed something was urgent, then perhaps it deserved attention. Both commanders reluctantly ordered their forces to hold position. They traveled to Concordia 7 along with representatives from both empires and all the neutral observer species. The chamber was packed with beings from across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to witness humanity's final play. Santos stood at the central podium looking calm despite the tension. Chun and the other human advisors stood beside her. Thank you all for coming, she began. I know you're eager to get back to your final battles, but there's something you need to see first. She activated a massive holographic display. It showed both empires' military deployments in real time. This is the current strategic situation, Santos explained. The Vryn fleet is positioned to strike the Cathari throne world. The Cathari strike teams are ready to destroy the Vryn communication network. Both operations will launch in approximately 6 hours. The assembled representatives murmured in confusion. Why was she revealing classified military information? Santos continued. Now let me show you what happens if both operations proceed. The hologram came alive with simulation data. The Vryn fleet struck the throne world. Cathari leadership was annihilated. The Empire began to collapse. Simultaneously, Cathari strike teams destroyed the Vryn communication nodes. The collective fragmented into isolated colonies. Both civilizations suffered catastrophic damage. As you can see, Santos said calmly, both operations will succeed. The chamber erupted in. Chowskalith jumped to his feet, roaring. How do you know our plan? 9's voice echoed with betrayal. You shared our strategies with the enemy? Santos raised her hands for silence. Every human advisor has been working according to the same plan, she stated. We have been coordinating both sides toward this exact moment. Both of you now face mutual annihilation. The magnitude of the manipulation slowly became clear. The humans have been playing both sides from the beginning. They had taught both empires to win, but they had done it in a way that guaranteed both empires would destroy each other. This is treachery. Scourith bellowed. You claimed to help us. We did help you, Chun replied, stepping forward. We helped you achieve exactly what you wanted. A clear path to total victory over your ancient enemy. You both have it now. The problem is that you both have it at the same time. 9's crystalline form glowed with cold fury. You manipulated us into a position where victory equals defeat. Yes, Santos confirmed, because that's the only thing that would make you stop. She pulled up more data showing projected casualties. If both operations launch, you're looking at 14 billion dead on the Cathari throne world. The Vryn will fragment into 63 isolated colonies, most of which will die without the collective consciousness. Combined casualties across both empires will exceed 40 billion. The war will indeed end. There will be no victor because there will be no one left to claim victory. The chamber fell silent as the reality sank. And neutral observers stopped taking bets. This was no longer entertainment. This was extinction. Santos let the silence stretch before speaking again. But there is another option. She changed the display to show a peace proposal. Both sides stand down immediately, except the current territorial divisions, as permanent borders, enter into a formal peace treaty with Earth as guarantor. Human advisors remain in both militaries to ensure neither side attempts a surprise advantage. Trade resumes. Contested systems are jointly administered, and both civilizations get to discover what they might accomplish if they stop defining themselves by war. Scaloreth stared at the proposal, with emotions warring across his reptilian face. You're asking us to surrender after 300 years. I'm asking you to survive, Santos replied. You've been fighting so long that you forgot what peace looks like. You turned the war into the foundation of your societies. But foundations can be rebuilt. Nine's glow had dimmed to a faint shimmer. The collective cannot exist without unity of purpose. War has been that purpose for generations. Then find a new purpose, Santos suggested. Explore, create, trade, grow. The galaxy is vast, and you've spent 3 centuries staring at each other. There's so much more out there. The two commanders looked at each other across the chamber for the first time in 300 years. They saw each other not as eternal enemies, but as fellow victims of their own inertia. If we accept this peace, Scour said slowly, what guarantees do we have that you won't manipulate us again? None whatsoever, Santos answered honestly. You'll have to trust us, and we'll have to trust you. That's what peace means. Nine communicated with the other Vryn representatives through their telepathic network. Skalth consulted with his war council. Neutral observers waited to see if the galaxy would end in fire or compromise. After 16 hours of deliberation, both empires reached their decisions. They accepted the peace treaty. The war ended not with a final glorious battle, but with a stunned silence across dozens of sectors. Ships powered down their weapon soldiers, stood down from alert civilians on both sides, tried to comprehend a future without war. The neutral species were divided in their reactions. Some praised humanity's bold intervention. Others condemned them for manipulating galactic powers. Everyone agreed on one thing. No, these humans were dangerous not because of their technology or their physical abilities, but because they thought in ways no one else did. They saw problems from angles others couldn't imagine. They questioned assumptions that everyone else accepted as immutable facts. Over the following weeks, the peace treaty was formalized. Human advisors helped both empires begin the difficult process of restructuring their economies away from total war trade. Routes opened for the first time in Centurius. Vin and Kethri representatives began hesitant negotiations about the contested territories. It was awkward and hostile and uncomfortable, but it was peace won. Year later, Captain Maria Santos stood on Concordia 7 watching a joint Vryn-Kethri engineering team work together on a shared infrastructure project. The sight would have been unthinkable 18 months ago. First Officer Chun joined her at the observation window. You know they still resent us, he said quietly. Of course they do, Santos replied. We humiliated them and forced them into peace. But they're alive, and their civilizations survived. Give them another decade and they'll realize this was better. Chun nodded. Earth has received 17 requests for human mediators from other conflicts in the galaxy. Everyone wants a piece of our particular brand of chaos. Santos smiled. We're not chaos, she corrected. We're just willing to ask the questions nobody else thinks to ask. She looked out at the station where dozens of species now mixed and traded. The galaxy was changing. Humanity had become a power not through military might or advanced technology, but through something more fundamental, the ability to see problems from unexpected directions, the willingness to challenge ancient patterns, the audacity to believe that even the impossible could be changed. You know what the irony is? Santos said. The Vryn and Kethri spent 300 years thinking the war was theirs. They believed they understood it completely. They were so locked into their perspectives that they couldn't see any other possibilities. Then, we showed up, Chun understood, and we didn't know the rules, so we ignored them. Exactly, Santis confirmed. Sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't strength or technology. It's just a fresh perspective and the courage to use it. She turned away from him. The window. Come on, she said. We have 16 more conflicts to mediate, and I want to be home for Earth's first contact. Day celebration. Chun laughed. You mean the day we accidentally stumbled into an alien war zone and nearly got killed? That's the one, Santis agreed. We should probably come up with a better founding myth for humanity's galactic presence.